Hi, I am here this morning to improvise a little bit of thoughts around the astrology going on right now because it feels like a pretty heavy time. And I've had questions about that myself and just wanted to do some exploring and figure out kind of what's going on right now and what's in store for us. So because a lot of the dynamics that have happened this year and have been kind of ongoing and then are at a certain kind of head right now are impacting large groups of people. I'm going to spend some time with looking at outer planets. So these are planets from Saturn onwards because those planets stay in a sign for a long time, which basically means that you have a whole group of people who share that same energy. So it'll be in that particular sign, but it's moving, so it progresses. So one of the aspects that's been pretty prominent this year is the Saturn-Neptune square, which currently we're looking at Saturn at 15 degrees Sagittarius and Neptune at 9 degrees Pisces. So technically, because you can kind of give a 5 to 10 degree orb with some of these bigger planets because they're slower moving, they're big energies. Neptune's particularly watery and fluid, so it encompasses a lot. So the impact is still there, but it's also beginning to separate. So we are kind of on the waning cusp of that energy being very potent. But the energy of the Saturn and Neptune square is a lot around reality having to meet our ideals and our ideals having to meet reality. That's one way to look at it. So when you have situations where things you really believed in or believed to be true, or some sense of connection to all people and greater compassion gets pit against some reality and that challenges that, those are very Saturn and Neptune dynamics. The opportunity for this energy is that when our ideals and when our belief in this connectedness and this deeper compassion does meet that reality, and we contend with that reality through faith, which is the higher Neptunian compassion energy as well, while still facing that Saturn. We can't ignore it because we want these two energies to work together. If we find a way for those two to work together, where we can both be with the present reality of what's in front of us and hold to, aspire to, and continue to believe in the higher ideals and compassion that we have, then we manifest that. So Saturn is the manifestation of all that we've been before and continue to bring into the material realm, but it exists in a state of limits. So because of that, it's more earthy, it's more bound, it's more confining, which is a big contrast to Neptune, which is this watery, abysmal, like everything's connected, the connectedness of rivers into oceans, and that everything is very linked up. The Earth has this structure to it, and the nice part about Earth having this structure is it contains and it holds. But Saturn, even beyond just structures, so you could say, okay, this is the structures of governments, this is the structure of a building that you build, this is the structure of our bones. It's also all manifestation. Saturn is manifestation. So anything that exists in your life at this moment that you are contending with, you wake up in the morning, the sun gets up, the light is beautiful, you make your oatmeal, your boyfriend gets up too, maybe he's in a funky mood. All of these are your Saturn manifestation. So waking up and having a moment where each of us in our own ways are contending with, say, election results, that's the reality in front of us. So it has a limit, it defines something, it puts something in space that we are forced to reckon with in some way. The Neptunian energy, where it can also be at odds with Saturn, is that Neptune, because it believes so deeply, and there's so much about Neptune that's longing. It's this longing for the infinite, this longing for this return to the womb, kind of has that feel to it. So when that energy sometimes hits Saturn, Neptune is also the energy of escapism. So it's easy to want to look at this reality you don't want to contend with, don't know how to contend with, maybe you're so worn down by because Saturn is very heavy, and to escape. So Neptune can also be the energy of escapism. So it's related to drugs and addictions of all kinds, anything that can pull you away from having to deal with a reality. But it also just pulls you into the space where everything is connected. So it's both escapism and spirituality. So all spiritual essences, I think when we get into religions, we add a little more of the structural element. So it can have more of a Saturn quality. It can have more of a, there's another energy I think in religions, but that's a whole other topic because that's kind of shifted over the course of time. But a lot of Neptune is that higher source kind of energy, but it's the higher source both in terms of what's outward and above and in what we most deeply long for. So, when you look at depth psychology and things like that, which are very Plutonic Scorpio energy things, the role of Neptune in that is it's that seed of the unmet need of our unfulfilled longing that we all have that kind of creates this gap that leaves us searching and hungering for something. So some of Neptune meeting Saturn creates that tension between those. And if we can learn to work with that, one way being Saturn in its structural, in its kind of asserting and defining stance is also about taking responsibility. So a way to move into responsibility in a Neptunian fashion is to take responsibility for your higher ideals in the face of whatever reality is in front of you, and to be able to receive that with compassion and manifest what you believe in while honoring and receiving what's there. It's hard work. It takes a lot of time because Neptune is very vast and big, and Saturn is about time. Saturn is about things moving fairly slowly, so it's not something that's going to manifest right away. So having worked with this year, a lot of the belief systems that are getting restructured, this drive for belief systems to be restructured, for governmental systems to be restructured, for the way we move about the world needing restructure, and us kind of not knowing where that's going to happen, is both this energy of Pluto being in Capricorn, which is a Saturn energy planet sign, and having this tension between Neptune and Saturn. And so because Neptune is playing a role, we're not only in this orientation of things are going to take time, we've got to be practical about how they take time, but we're having to contend with realities that are really hard and that sit at a disjunction with our deeper beliefs and our connection to humanity, and we're all doing it in our own ways, even if we don't agree with each other. I mean, that's what's kind of amazing about these systems is we can be coming from very similar energies in a way that looks very different, and the wisdom of Neptune is to tap into that, because actually there's a place where our deeper compassion knows that, and we can have different manifestations and still be connected. But Saturn forces us to work through the constrictions and the frictions in order to know that. So one of the hard pieces that if you're going to work with the energy of Neptune and Saturn is it's important because you're grounding this spiritual energy to be with what's there. So often there's a big role that grief plays. having to let go of certain things in order to be present to other things. So it's a kind of painful process. It's not something that just easily flows. Neptune wants to easily flow, but Saturn cuts that right down. And so it requires fortitude, and it requires an ability to tolerate pain. Similarly, Pluto requires an ability to tolerate pain because it's also a very intense planet, where Saturn is heavy and pushes down and constricts. Pluto just like can come, like, well, Uranus is more coming out of nowhere, but Pluto is powerful. And Pluto are the things in life that hit us that we have no control over. So it is power, and our interaction with powers greater than us, whether those are natural forces or circumstances or a bigger organization being able to do something and we're the small guy, that kind of dynamic is a very Pluto one. And because again we have Pluto in Capricorn, we're contending with this power of structures. But interestingly, in addition to being about power, Pluto is also about transformation. So often those things that, come at us that we have no control over, that really eventually force us to surrender, transform the way we know ourselves, the way we run our society. Well, because of Capricorn, it'll be the way that we exist in structures. So it'll be about time, it'll be about systems, it'll be about belief systems as much as actual like governmental economic systems around us, and it is a long journey. So we are right now at, Pluto is in 15 degrees Capricorn, halfway through that degree, and it moves back and forth. I think Pluto had gone retrograde, was it this year? I don't remember. So Pluto is very slow moving, and we're only halfway through it. So we are in a process of restructuring systems for a very long time. But in terms of this year and this time that we've been in, last month, towards the end of the month, we looked at a conjunction that's, pretty potent and activating of that Pluto energy, which is that Mars, which is the energy of action, initiative, doing, desire, really what propels us to move into something. So it's the kind of energy that's like, okay, talking about this is all fine and dandy, but what can we do? And let's do it now. So the practical pieces like Virgo energy, like what's the practical application? That can even have Saturn, like what's realistic. But Mars is the kind that's like ready to get up out of the seat, just get started. So Mars can sometimes be an energy that gets started without thinking. It's not really always worried about thinking. But, if it learns to work with Mercury and learns to work with other Virgo energies, then it can be. But moving through the energy of Capricorn gives it that practical application feel. So even though we have this like flame of like initiative popping up, it manifests in this energy of practical application, things taking time, taking action, but knowing that it takes one step at a time, and it has to, you have to be steady, take responsibility for what's going on. So all of that energy was pretty stabilized in the Capricorn. But this Mars energy conjunct, which means it sat right on the degree where Pluto was. And when that happens, it's like an activation, because it takes what's this bigger energy, like we said, like this is going to be in Pluto for a long time. This is something we're walking through for a good while. But Mars getting there just like says, okay, we've got to do something now. So it's like it just gets you up off of your seat. And some part of you wants to have a plan and wants to just, or either wants to have a plan or kind of just does anyway. So a lot of our transformations got very activated, and because power Pluto does have that energy of this power that we have to surrender to, you may have experienced things that you took initiative on, but you also had to surrender to. So being present to that deeper transformation and acting on a deeper transformation. It has that interesting, contradiction of stepping into something while also surrendering to something bigger. So we've walked through some of that energy too. The other piece was there Uranus. Uranus was recently square Mars, which the square is another point of tension, which point of tensions create friction, but they also activate and they get you moving. So Mars being square with things usually gets things shaken up. And Uranus is the energy of innovation and change, kind of the change agent, and it's about surprise. So it's often things that are unexpected, things that just kind of come in and just like shake things up. It's the energy of genius. So it's having this broader sense of something, but this openness to the unexpected. So not just a mastery. Saturn's a lot of the energy of mastery, but Uranus is the energy of, okay, yeah, there's mastery, but then you got to be open to that unexpected variable in order to really pioneer and move things forward. So having Mars there meant that and it was very recently there, I have to look back to see where that exact square was. We've had some surprises, and there's surprises that we're still contending with, but Uranus being in the sign of Aries makes it so that these surprises are redefining who we are, so our identity and our sense of self, and that can be the gift of them, even if that is difficult or challenging or in some way unexpected and hard to process. So we've had some of these big dynamics going on, and the thing with astrology is there's certain big dynamics that are going to happen no matter what, but we also always have the choice about how we interact with them and how we choose to be with those energies, both in our world and in ourselves. And with each, there's an opportunity. And I think some of the opportunity of these big dynamics of transformation and change and hard realities, and still somehow being able to have faith in these higher ideals and have compassion in the face of difference. There's something we can learn, and I think the nature of them right now is that we don't really know what that is. We may have action steps, and we may feel fired up and like there's something we can do, and that's the nice empowerment of the Mars piece, is it gets us like, no, something's going to be done, and we're going to do it, and I feel the fuel, and it's being able to tap into that's really great. So we've been given this gift of this Mars-Pluto conjunction that in the face of surrendering to a bigger power, we have individual initiative. So we're offered that, but it's uncertain where it's taking us, and there may be unexpected things along the way, and we're still contending with that Neptunian washy ideal that is causing us to face things. So I think even in light of events that have happened, Saturn energy, that are really confounding, upsetting, disappointing, there's also an opportunity to step more deeply into your place of faith and belief. And if you're coming from that place of having faith and belief and feeling inspired by change, the opportunity is to access that compassion. Because we're contending with forces that don't easily get along, But if we can find a way, if we can be present to all we're feeling while being open to what's in front of us, we can find a way to listen and to know ourselves, that Uranus in Aries identity piece, to know ourselves in a more authentic way, that we'll be able to hear that. And Uranus has been in Aries for a while, so in some ways we've been in that journey. It's been moving back and forth. It's been retrograde in impact. It still is, yeah. So we've had Uranus moving backwards and retracing its path around identity, and finding that authentic identity. So we're still doing it, and it's contending with all of these bigger forces and being activated. So I think that's where, for my part, even as I have found myself needing to surrender and actually preferring to, wanting to be present to all of the feelings that these things bring up, because I think embedded in those feelings we have truths. And if we're just going to rise above and pretend like they're not there, then we're not going to hear what's deep, deep, deep down. And I think that's some of the gift of Pluto, is Pluto enforcing us to surrender if we can just allow ourselves to fall into that depth and be with that feeling. Out of that pain, something blossoms, and we can hear something a little bit better, and we can know ourselves better. And so I think in light of all this and facing what we're facing, that's my hope, is that with I and we can be with this, with each other, and listen a little bit better.